and welcome to BCAT Studios. My name is Deirdre Lavelle, and I'm your host in today's episode of Justice in America. My guest in the studio today is Irwin Ironstone. Citizen Ironstone is here today to elaborate on our earlier program, where he was also our studio guest, on an item called what will we call it? A quitam. And the quitam offers American citizens the ability to redress fraudulent use of federal government funds. We had some very interesting topics come up in our last program about the way funds are used and how citizens are able to bring court action against other state agencies, against individuals, corporations, and anyone who has a contract, institutions and so forth, anyone who has a contract to provide goods or services to the federal government and who makes fraudulent claims. These are our tax dollars, and we certainly have a right to redress any wrongdoing on our behalf. So, Irwin, please talk to us about the individual claim that you made against two states. I want you to talk to us about that and why you did that.
Okay, very good. There are times when I talk about the quitam action. It's also known as the Lincoln Law because it was passed in this country during President Lincoln's term during the Civil War, and also the False Claims Act, or the FCA. Now, I raised actions against the state of New Jersey and the state of Florida. And it was interesting because I didn't initially have the state of Florida in, but sometimes it takes quite a while for the federal courts and the Justice Department to act on a quitam. And I help people who can't afford attorneys, and I'm not an attorney by any means, but I have a logical mind. I'm a programmer. And what I did is I was helping one person who had to pay child support in the state of Florida. And his daughter was over 18 and had graduated from high school, but he hadn't filed an action to terminate the child support. And in Florida, the statute of the state says that when a child reaches 18, majority, and they're healthy, they can then terminate child support. My question is, this should be done automatically. And one of the reasons I say it should be done automatically is that if it isn't done, they can't recover the money. But even more than that, the state of Florida, in this case, he lives in, I think, New Jersey, and both states collect extra money from the federal government. Not only do they handle administrative expenses, the federal government pays both Florida and New Jersey at least 66% of all administrative expenses associated with child collection. But just to make it sweeter for the states, in child support, they give them a bonus. And that bonus is 6% of all money collected. And it's not just given to the one state, it's given to both states. So both Florida and New Jersey, or New York, it depends on which state the actions are, collect 6% of the child support collected as a freebie. The child or the mother, still gets the right amount, but what happens is each of the states gets a bonus. So in this case, let's say he paid $5,000 in child support that he really shouldn't have paid because the child was emancipated. But what happened is each of the states got 6% of that, or 12% of $5,000.
So you're telling me that because two states were involved, resident of the father and resident of the mother and child, that both states had their hand in the proverbial till over this child support action. I'm flabbergasted because this really blows a hole in the deadbeat dad ideal that many people are under the impression that the state is enacting a necessary enforcement policy.
Well, in this case, these states are deadbeat because in these cases, each of them has collected 6% of $5,000, or together they've collected about $600 in this one case as a bonus, as a freebie.
On money that the parent at that stage was not actually entitled to.
Exactly, but
Wow.
realize that the child support amount wasn't reduced,
Right.
but the federal government said, here, I'm giving you an extra $600 because you've collected it. But there never should have been a collection. So I haven't seen Florida or New Jersey or New York return that money to the federal government. That's fraud on behalf of the government, of the state government, against the federal government.
Yes, it
now,
is.
usually what happens is, and I'll say that I went on the internet and I got a table, and what the table was is, it's a table from the American Bar Association on child support guidelines. And it says basically that about 35 states say that after 18 years of age, children are emancipated and the parents don't have to support them. There are some exceptions to that. If a child, for example, is physically unable to work,
Disabled, for example.
then the parent still has to pay some type of support. But in this case, the majority of kids are healthy, and in 35, 36, 37 states, this should be done automatically. They should stop the child support. They
Now,
don't.
when we talk about automatic stopgaps in the system, surely there must be some mechanism. We all have a Social Security number. We are all on so many databases with regards to taxation, educational records, work records, you name it. We're on file somewhere. There must be some mechanism.
Well, obviously, you hit the nail on the head. As I said, I'm a computer programmer. Now, what it does is, I have a book called Computer Matching in State-Administered Benefit Programs. And what it is, it's a program and a book that's put out by a federal agency, Health and Human Services. Ordinarily, they do this to prevent welfare fraud. And they say, match different computer files.
Okay, so for example.
Yeah, for example, what they sometimes do is they match children in school against welfare rolls, so that if a child is sent out of state to another state, the state says, we don't have to pay welfare.
Okay.
Here, however, you have a database that contains children who are either graduating or graduated, and you have another database which says, here are the people who owe money in child support. I can't understand why they also don't match those. It's a simple match that's done twice a year. And what that would mean is child support would stop when the child is 18 or before 19 if they graduate from high school.
So as we discussed in the last program, Irwin, this is a case of what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they are able to monitor information that controls what they have to pay out, why is it so difficult to monitor information that controls what comes in?
Well, I think one of the reasons is very simple. They're getting paid a bonus. If you were getting paid a bonus, you know, some people obviously would say, well, I don't deserve this.
Deserve it, or
however,
I'm not entitled.
In this case, the state of Florida hasn't stopped. The state of New Jersey or New York hasn't said, hey, you know, this kid is over 18. This state says that after 18, stop. So what happens, and again, even if it goes on for a couple of months, what happens is, let's say it goes on for 3 or 4 months until they stop the child support. 3 or 4 months means $2,000, $3,000 is paid in child support. Each of the states, and this is within a state also. And if only one state, it's only 6%. Let's say $3,000, 6% of $3,000 is $180 or $200, around that amount.
That's one person.
Right. Now, if people, and there are thousands and thousands of people paying child support where the kid is over 18. Now, if you say $200 times 3,000 people, that's $600,000. And that's only $600,000 for one state for 1 year. Now, obviously, one of the things about the False Claims Act, it says that there are triple damages. So if a state knows that they should be doing these computer matches and they don't, then the federal government says, according to the False Claims Act, we can assess triple damages. So if we're talking about $300,000 or $400,000, what we're really talking about is let's say $2 million, and there might be 20 states that aren't emancipating these kids when the kids reach 18. So the fraud that's being done is really a huge scale. Just on this one issue, it's probably 20 to 30 million for just this one claim. Now, there are other claims that I made. I made 5 claims in this action against the state of New Jersey. And the reason I did it against the state of New Jersey is I went through a divorce there.
Okay.
And one of the things that happened is I was told that I hadn't paid child support and I had to pay arrears. It means you didn't pay, you're a bad person, we're going to collect extra money from you.
Okay.
I had the checks that were given or sent to my ex for child support.
So even on production of those?
No, but even on production of those, the judge said, well, they didn't go to the state agency, so they didn't get reimbursed, so we're saying they were a gift. And although that doesn't appear on the record, I have the canceled checks, I have the record from the state of New Jersey saying that that's when the child support started. So effectively, I had to pay an extra $4,000 or $5,000, and after I paid that $4,000 or $5,000, the state of New Jersey has no mechanism to prevent or to stop those arrears. So they've continued to collect because they're getting reimbursed by the federal government for the money, the extra money that they taken, even though they don't deserve it.
It's scandalous. And the answer that they gave you was that you may have paid it, but you didn't pay it as child support. So we weren't reimbursed, and therefore you're being penalized for them not getting their bonus. Basically, that's what we're talking about.
That's one of the bases of the actions. And the judge knew it.
I'm dumbfounded.
Now, obviously, I tried to sue this judge personally, and the federal court said, no, you don't have a cause of action. Now, however, I'm doing it on behalf of the federal government, saying that not only don't they stop the arrears taking off money from me, but there are probably thousands of other people in New Jersey who, after they've paid all they can, still have money collected from them, which they shouldn't have. Now, that's fraud on the part of the state of New Jersey.
Yes, it is.
Now, I tried to raise this issue by sending a letter. They are required by federal law to send you a letter for if you want your child support reviewed. I said, yes, I want my child support reviewed. There's been fraud. And they never responded. So I then took it to a judge. And this judge said, well, you hadn't filed the right papers, you hadn't done this. And I said, wait a minute. And the other thing he tried to do is he tried to dismiss me. I said, they're in violation of a federal statute. They're supposed to make modifications and corrections. He said, well, you brought it before another judge. I said, never. And the reason he wanted that is if another judge had found that I had raised this action, he wouldn't have to do it. So he was, in a sense, getting a little lazy. And he said, well, okay. And this was after like a 2 or 3 hour court session where I was speaking. The other party didn't even show up. And the other party in the action, the lawyer representing my ex-wife, had committed fraud so frequently, and I'll say that, and had misrepresented material facts, but that other party is an attorney. And what happens is attorneys aren't held accountable by judges because judges protect attorneys, and frequently attorneys protect judges, even though they commit fraud against the federal government, in this case specifically. Okay, now, what happened is I had raised this issue, and I said, Judge, will you do something about it? He's doing this not as a judge. This is administrative because they're collecting money they shouldn't be collecting.
Correct.
So judges lose immunity when they function administrative. They're not making a judicial decision. They're just saying, hey, child support. So this judge was nice in a sense. It's Judge Cummis. He got the department to send me an accounting. It wasn't a computerized accounting. It was a handwritten accounting. Now, they're supposed to keep computer records. They're funded and reimbursed by the federal government to maintain accurate computer records. They
And probably
don't.
provided computers to do
Exactly. So again, they obviously haven't done that. In any case, I tried to point out to the judge, look, I have a cause of action, but I'd like it held up because there are other issues that I am trying to resolve. And he said, no, I'm dismissing it. You can bring it back later. But the answer is he knew there was fraud. He knew he's the one who sent me the accounting saying I'd overpaid more than $4,000 in child support. So he's a party in a sense, and he's allowing this fraud to go on.
So you're telling me that you're also suing the judge?
No, I'm not at this point. I have him on tape because in New Jersey they allow these actions to be taped on, tape recorders. So he basically said, I sent you the accounting, why didn't you do anything with it? And the answer is, wait a minute. Why would any citizen have to do anything when the state in their, it's a common era, effectively is not doing their job? The only reason I can see that they're not doing the job is they're getting extra money, reimbursement, every time I pay additional money. Now, this is outrageous.
It is outrageous. But I have another question. I'm not playing the devil's advocate here, but it seems to me as though our federal government must either be so top-heavy or so inept at administrating or keeping tabs on the kinds of policies and programs that they are endorsing and financing, because there should be, seems to me anyway, that there should be some mechanism of control coming from the federal branch on monies that they hand over to the state. So, okay, the state are clearly bad accountants. That's a point of fact. But the federal government actually give them the money. So don't they have any kind of controls over?
They have some, but obviously they haven't looked at each of these actions.
Okay.
Realize that this is an industry. The federal government pays about $4 billion for their own staff,
yes,
and they employ 55,000 people related to child support collection.
Are you serious?
Yes.
55,000 people?
Yes, and realize I got this from a book, by the way, called Divorced Dads, where I interviewed one of the authors of the Divorced Dads book. And the reason she raised it is that one of the difficulties is when parents, both parents, mother and father, because I also help women who don't have custody, see their children, they're more willing to pay child support. They're involved in that child's life. But that's totally different show.
Totally different show.
Okay. What I was going to talk about, though, is, so again, the second cause of action, or one of the causes, was New Jersey knowingly defraud the federal government by continuing to collect, even though their accounting procedures, they sent me the records, show that they've over-collected on arrears that they never should have even collected. And, again, one judge, I made this clear to one judge, and I said this other judge, a prior judge, made an error. He said, well, I can't handle that. And the problem is, in the judiciary, the average person who goes to court really can't defend themselves because there are so many different rules. You forgot to dot this I and cross this T, therefore we're not going to handle this case. And yet they allow lawyers to put in fraudulent statements. They allow lawyers to submit things that they'll accept, and they pay these lawyers outrageous amounts. So they have you pay the lawyers even though they're lying. So perjury.
This is a great distress. This is a very distressing issue for viewers who may be watching, because it makes us feel powerless. We are actually living in a society that is controlled thoroughly and totally controlled by legal proceedings and legal actions. How is it, and I know I want to continue on about your trials and tribulations, but you are not yourself a legal advocate, but you have, under your own steam, done enough research, done quite a bit of research, talked to people, asked questions, gone online, you work with paralegals, you are in a position to have more information than most people. But we have to be able, I think, in the program to encourage people to feel as though they're not completely helpless. How did you manage to gather up the strength to kind of really push yourself to do this?
One of the reasons I've done this is that after a period of time, you say, wait a minute, this is a system that's supposed to work for us, not against us.
Quite right.
And I've seen, and again, I've helped a lot of people. In fact, one of the groups I belong to meets at Manhattan Cable Television, and it's called Pro Se Views. And the person there has been advocating that New York State allow cameras into the courts. The reason is when there are cameras, judges act so differently.
They behave differently, I'm sure they do.
They tend to be honest. They're better prepared. When you go up and say, that lawyer's lying, judge, what are you going to do about it? And there's a camera there, and the judge knows that camera can be used elsewhere. Even if it's never used, he's aware the camera's there, and he's going to say, why didn't you review these papers? And he says that to a lawyer. Otherwise, it never happens.
It never happens.
I have these audio tapes that to me are fascinating because can you imagine, a picture is worth 1,000 words. If they ever took a camera, and by the way, I requested a camera in the state courts, judge said, not me. I don't want to be on camera. But even there, the issue is, first of all, the other thing is, how does someone appeal if you have a judge who's incompetent at a lower level or one who gets angry at you? Judges are allowed to get angry. They're people, they're human, but you don't have any recourse unless you appeal. And you can't sue the judge even if he makes a decision that everyone knows is wrong because he has, quote, judicial immunity. Now, there are issues that I'd like to bring up in a whole bunch of shows, but let's talk about what happens if a judge knowingly does something wrong. You have no recourse except to appeal. If you had to appeal, you have to buy a transcript. Now, if you have to buy a transcript, it's literally about, although the legal rate is about $1.50 in New York, they charge you $4 or $5 dollars a page, and they triple space the lines. And sometimes the appeals, the paper, in order to get an appeal, costs you $4, $5, $8, $900. Most people can't afford it. That videotape, which you can get for $10, should be allowed for appeals. But I know we're wandering off this cause of action, and what I'd like to do is I've raised two of the causes of action. I'd like to raise one additional one. For example, in the state of New Jersey, I was helping someone, and their child dropped out of college.
Okay,
but
this is relative also to the child support issue.
Now, one of the things that happens is he was paying not only child support, but he was paying part of the college tuition. And he had prepaid certain expenses for the next term. But the child didn't tell him, first of all, because he had been alienated, that he had dropped out. And the second cause is that the child never went back. He, for whatever reason, decided it wasn't for him at this time. Now, the judge, and this was a New Jersey case, said, well, we're holding you accountable for child support until the following term because we never know if the child is going to go back to school.
But he was over 18 years old.
The child is about 21 and dropped out of college. Now,
so this is a perfect example of this fraudulent use of government funds to collect child support for children who are beyond the age of being supported. And
who aren't going to school.
Who aren't going to school.
Now,
and who aren't physically disabled.
The other part of that, which to me is amazing, is that what happens is the child knows he's dropped out. He can, and again, in this country, at 18, any child can enter a contract. They can get married. They can do anything except drink alcohol.
Actually, at 21, they can.
Exactly. So what happens is, in this case, who knows that he's dropped out of college? The child does, and usually the custodial parent, or either one of them reporting it to the state saying, well, my child no longer needs child support. The answer is no, because they're getting money. That's fraud on their part. But the government doesn't do anything to enforce or to say, hey, notify us because we're collecting this child support. and we're getting a bonus from the feds because of it, and we're defrauding the feds. We're getting extra money. Who cares? That's really one of the issues.
Yes.
Now, again, in other instances, the state of New Jersey said the person who knows about an action should make other parties aware. In welfare, which we talked about before, the state has you sign a contract. If there's a change in circumstance, hey, notify us, because we're going to reduce your grant because there's another party, let's say, who moves into the house or out of the house. And based upon that, the state effectively says, we want to know because we're paying money.
Okay, so again, we are back at this situation where what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Exactly.
As long as there are all sorts of mechanisms, databases, stopgaps, all kinds of controlling and monitoring devices in place, if the state is in a situation where they are paying. But as long as they're on the receiving end, there's no means of monitoring.
I don't think I'm going to have enough time to raise all of the actions, because I have 5 altogether. We've only touched on 2.5. But maybe we'll come back in the future.
We will come back another time and go through other actions. I am so delighted that you were able to help us bring this to the attention of Americans today, and also to reiterate that if you have any suspicion about false claims being made against the federal government or any state agency, please do contact the Taxpayers Against Fraud. They're on the internet at www.taf.org. Please join us and help our tax dollars be spent and appropriated the way we were intending them to be. And we'd like to thank BCAT for making this opportunity to discuss issues that are never discussed public. And thank you, Irwin, and thank our studio crew.
I'd love to thank the studio crew, those on the camera. I know Teresa in the control room, Mr. Friedman, Terrence, and Linda, and Curly, who's the cameraman over here, and Bruce. Okay, Bruce? I just said Mr. Friedman. It's okay.
Thanks again. Thank you, BCAT.
Okay. It was very good, I think.